Yeah, I'm in my office too.
Councilor Flynn.
Hey, Kerry.
Yeah,
Hey,
we're
Kenzie.
live, and it's 11, so we can get started whenever you're ready. Just let me know.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending the City Council hearing today. My name is Boston City Council Ed Flynn, and I'm Chair of the Committee on City and Neighborhood Services. Today we are having a hearing on docket number 1054, order for a hearing to discuss house parties and gatherings during COVID-19 pandemic. The hearing was sponsored by myself, Councilors Flaherty and Braden. I am joined at this time by Councilor Braden, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Arroyo, Councilor Bach, and when my other colleagues come in, I will announce them as well. This hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/citycouncil-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN 82, FiOS Channel 964. The Zoom link to provide public testimony for the hearing can be found by emailing juan.lopez@boston.gov. Please make sure that your Zoom handle is your full name. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation and residence, and limit your comments to 2 minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. If you are unable to provide testimony today, you may submit written testimony or a 2-minute video for our record by emailing the committee at ccc.cns@boston.gov or filling out the form on our website within 48 hours following the hearing. I will first let the sponsors of the hearing offer brief remarks, and I'll also ask my other colleagues if they would like to make brief remarks as well. And then I'll ask the panel to speak. But at this time, I would like to acknowledge and thank the panel for being here. Dion Irish, who is the Commissioner of the Inspectional Services Department. Aisha Miller, Assistant Commissioner of Constituent Services, Inspectional Services Department. Leon Bethune, Director, Community Initiatives Bureau, Boston Public Health Commission. And we have written comments by the Boston Police Department, which I think Commissioner Irish will read. At this time, I would like to ask Councilor Braden if she would like to give opening comments. Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you also to all the panelists for being here this morning. This is a very timely discussion that we are having with regard to parties and gatherings in the context of COVID. I raised the alarm way back in early July or earlier, maybe May, about the potential for infection from gatherings, specifically in this neighborhood of students living off campus. But there's a huge number, as we're seeing from the numbers, about 50% of the new infections are in an age group under 39 years old. So it's obvious that there is continued spread of this infection. And I'd like to have a better understanding of what we can do to help manage that. And also some understanding of how best we can communicate the importance of this basic public health precautions to try and reduce the spread of this infection. So thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Chairman Flynn and Council Braden, for your partnership on this issue, and for my colleagues for joining in. House parties have always been a major quality of life issue across the city, particularly in neighborhoods that are in close proximity and or our host communities for our colleges, universities, Alston, Brighton, Mission Hill, Fenway come to mind. But we've also seen our city undergo gentrification as well. So a lot of our neighborhoods are becoming younger, and as Councilor Braden just alluded to, we're starting to see the COVID numbers tick up, but the age group seems to be dipping down from sort of the first wave. So have to say that the presence of COVID-19 has completely raised the stakes on this matter, shifting it from a quality of life issue to a major public health concern. Chairman Flynn and I were on a call recently with Chief Martinez, and our concerns about as they start to sort of roll back, and they're asking that our restaurants and restaurant and bar establishments had to roll back to 9:30. These kids, in particular, I use the phrase kids, the younger residents that we have in our city, they're not just going to go home. They're not just going to call it a day and say, "Oh, geez, we can't hang here anymore. We have to finish up and we have to go home." Home's not going to be an option. It's going to be, where are we going next? And we're going to start to see, large groups gather in people's homes. So if we think that we have a house party issue now, we're going to start to see that exacerbate over the next few weeks as we head into to the holiday season. So that said, here to listen to the panel of experts and committed public servants to identify how we can better enforce the existing guidelines around large gatherings, as well as find ways to spread more public awareness about the dangers of large gatherings that are taking place in our neighborhoods, particularly during the spread of COVID-19. And I know that my staff in particular has been working very closely with Dion Irish and with Aisha Miller. They've been doing great work. They've been very responsive. So I'm glad to see that they're going to be participating in today's hearing. And let's learn more from our partners at the Boston Public Health Commission as to ways we could do better on this front. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look forward to the testimony.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the makers. Obviously, as we see COVID rates go up across the city, this is a part of it. We know that house gatherings or parties will continue and will be more of an issue as people go indoors and move indoors with the weather. And so I'm interested in hearing what we're planning for, especially with the holiday season, with the winter breaks for these colleges coming up, with all these different things that are going on. So looking forward to the testimony. Thank you to the makers.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Councilor Bach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Councilors Braden and Flaherty for bringing this forward. As folks know, I represent Mission Hill and Fenway, both places where we have large student populations, and also, I think we've talked a lot about students, but also a lot of young folks my age, in their upper 20s, lower 30s, and I think that we all know that right now that COVID is a hard, strange time, and that everyone is looking for community, but I think just like everything that we're learning about our public health data suggests that we just really need to be doing everything we possibly can to discourage indoor parties in the weeks ahead. And it's something that folks in my neighborhoods are very anxious about. And I think, there's been a lot of great resources brought to bear both by ISD, the Public Health Commission, BPD, and then the universities themselves. I think sometimes one of the frustrations that I hear from neighbors I represent is just like not knowing exactly which of many lines to call and where different responses will be effective. And I know that we've heard in recent weeks about a more joined up effort between ISD and BPD and the universities. And I think it would be really helpful for the council and through us for our constituents to understand better what those new measures look like. So I'm glad to be here today. And again, grateful to my colleagues for bringing this important issue forward, because I think it was important for everyone to focus on singular super spreader events early in this, but I think unfortunately it's allowed people to bring their guard down about the idea that it could be, smaller scale families and friends gatherings that are allowing our cases to continue ticking upwards. And we just all really need to be vigilant right now because people's lives depend on it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Bach. Council President Janey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just echo what my colleagues have said and thank the makers for this very timely hearing. My district certainly doesn't suffer from a shortage of student college parties, things that can be super spreaders. I think this was certainly an issue pre-COVID, but given where we are with the cases rising, given where we are with the governor's new advisory out today, I think this conversation is right on time. I want to also thank the panel here, certainly Commissioner Iris, Deputy Commissioner Miller, for their work, not just for being here present, but for their work every single day. I've had the pleasure of working with them both, very responsive. I will have to step away for part of this hearing, Mr. Chair, but I want you to know that this is a very important issue. And when I'm not here, I certainly will make sure to review the recording and have staff on board as well. So thank you again for your leadership. Thank you again to the makers. Thank you to the panel. Let's get at it.
Thank you, Council President. And before I introduce the panel, let me just offer my opening comments. As Councilor Flaherty mentioned, we recently met on Zoom with 90 neighbors in South Boston, Boston Police Captain Boyle, Inspectional Service Department Assistant Commissioner Miller. Data from Boston Police has shown complaints for loud parties has increased substantially compared to last year throughout the pandemic. Boston Police have encouraged neighbors to continue to contact 911 to report this irresponsible and inconsiderate behavior. ISD has also instructed us to email Assistant Commissioner Miller from the mayor's problem property list as well. I want to thank Mayor Walsh for hosting a recent meeting in South Boston as well with Haley Dillon, who's from the Office of Neighborhood Services. But we know even with this issue, large house parties still persist. So we can look at policy changes, strict enforcement, and maybe think about increasing the fines. We'll have a higher fine for repeat violators. We also know that these large house parties are a quality of life issue due to their loud noise and impact on the quality of life for our residents, families, and children, our seniors, persons with disabilities. These parties often leave behind trash and litter all over the streets, attracting rodents and pests as well. But it's a public health emergency. It's a critical issue. It's important that we work together. We are working together as a city government, but we need the young people in Boston who are having these parties to step up and think about other people and not themselves. Think about our seniors and persons with disabilities and families. This is having a devastating impact. Having said that, I want to acknowledge Dion Irish, but I also want to say thank you to Assistant Commissioner Miller, who has done an outstanding job being very responsive, very cooperative in really addressing the concerns of residents. So I want to say thank you to the Assistant Commissioner. I want to say thank you to Commissioner Irish and the ONS team as well. Having said that, Commissioner Irish, would you like to open up?
Yes. Good morning, Chairman Flynn. Thank you, President Janey, Councilor Braden, all the Councilor Flaherty, all the esteemed members of the City Council. Also, wish a good morning to any members of the public who are watching and who are planning to participate in today's hearing. This is certainly an important and a timely issue. So thank you for your leadership on this and helping us to spread the word and to share how we're going to go about increasing our enforcement efforts. As you know, public health officials believe that large gatherings, particularly those in indoor enclosed environments, are significant contributory factors to the COVID-19 positivity rate that we're currently experiencing. Mayor Walsh has directed city agencies to increase our enforcement in order to discourage such activities at this time, and my colleagues and I are prepared to talk about how we're doing that. I can only think that as an undergrad at Boston University, I was involved in some of these parties, sometimes as a DJ, so I never thought I'd be saying this, but this is not the time to party. This is not the time. However, before we get into details about our enforcement strategy, I believe that, my colleague Leon Bethune from the Health Commission, or another colleague from the Health Commission, is going to help us to understand our current state of affairs with some information on where we are with COVID-19. Is that correct, Leon?
Oh, sorry. Good morning, councilors. Dion, I have a little bit in my talking points, so I will go over that when it's my turn. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. So in furtherance of Mayor Walsh's directives for greater enforcement against house parties and large gatherings that violate COVID-19 public health orders, the Inspectional Services Department, the Public Health Commission, the Boston Fire Department, the Licensing Board, the Civic Engagement Cabinet, and the Boston Police Department have coordinated our efforts to implement a multi-pronged enforcement strategy. The Boston Police, as you know, is the primary responder to party complaints throughout the city and therefore a critical partner to our COVID-19 enforcement efforts. Commissioner Gross couldn't be here today, as Chair Flynn mentioned. However, he did send a letter, and I'm going to ask Assistant Commissioner Aisha Miller to read that letter into the record, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Irish, Chairman Flaherty, and City Council President Janey, and all city councilors. Boston City Council's Committee on City and Neighborhood Services. Unfortunately, the Boston Police Department is unable to participate in today's hearing to discuss our house parties and large gatherings during the COVID-19 pandemic due to post-election operational plans. We appreciate all the opportunity to provide written testimony. We share the concerns of our council and the community regarding house parties and large gatherings and their potential for spreading COVID-19, as well as negatively impacting quality of life in our neighborhoods. The BPD put together a proactive comprehension plan across multiple districts during the spring, summer, and fall to address and prevent large outdoor gatherings in certain problem areas. This plan taxed our resources, but was extremely effective with almost no contentious incidents between our officers and the participants of the gatherings. The lessons learned from this effort will inform our work as we go into the winter months. The BPD has a party line that we publicize through our community service officers and social media. The purpose of this BPD party line is to give residents a direct contact for reporting the occurrence of loud parties. Residents are encouraged to use this resource as a means of preventing late night disorderly behavior and to reduce incidents of possible criminal conduct. The party line number is 617-343-5500. Residents may also report any disturbance to 911 or the neighborhood district station. The BPD responds to these calls by dispatching police officers to the scene to speak with individuals involved. Officers notify them of complaints that have been made and remind them of the governor's order and social distancing restrictions. Officers shut down parties and break up large gatherings as needed in a peaceful and orderly manner. If there's a criminal activity as parties or large gatherings, officers may make arrests or summons individuals into court. Common offenses related to parties or large gatherings include supplying, furnishing alcohol to minors, minor in possession of alcohol, and drinking alcohol in public. In addition, the owners of these houses where large parties occur are sometimes summoned for keeping a disorderly house. In addition, BPD partners with the Inspectional Services Division and Boston Public Health Commission to address problem properties and repeat offenders. When requested, BPD accompanies inspection teams to assist them with and provide police presence. The Boston Police Department will continue to work with the community and our many partners to protect and serve the residents of Boston. And we encourage the community to keep reporting parties and large gatherings through the party line or 911. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Miller. Mr. Bethune, would you like to offer opening statements? Opening comments?
Good morning, Councilor Flynn. Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Good morning, Councilor Flynn, Council President Janey, and members of the council. My name is Leon Bethune, and I'm the Director of the Initiative Bureau at the Boston Public Health Commission. I want to thank you for bringing us together today on this important topic. We share the council's concern about parties and gatherings at this time, and we want to be absolutely clear. There should be no parties or large gatherings held in Boston right now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Baker just signed an updated order number 54, which restricts gathering. The new gathering order reduces the gathering size limits for gathering at private residence. Indoor gathering at private residence are limited to 10 people, and outdoor gathering at private residence are limited to 25 people. The limit on gatherings held in public spaces and at event venues, for instance, a wedding, remains the same. The new order also requires that all gatherings, regardless of size or location, must end and disperse at 9:30 p.m. The new gathering order also requires that organizers of gatherings to report known positive COVID-19 cases to the local health department in that community and requires organizers to cooperate with contact tracing. The gathering order also authorized continued enforcement by local health and police departments and specifies that fines for violating that gathering order will be $500 for each person above the limit at a particular gathering. These new restrictions come at a time when we are deeply concerned about rising rates. Some stats from July 5th through October 31st, the weekly rates for new COVID increased significantly for all age groups. Among age groups, the Boston residents ages 20 to 29 had the highest COVID rates, 1,277 cases per 100,000 population for the most recent 4 months of July through October. Boston Public Health Commission response to parties and gathering is one important component to our overall COVID-19 response plan, where we are implementing a close partnership with Chief Martinez and the Health and Human Service Cabinet. The Boston Public Health Commission is also working in collaboration with our ISD partners to address reports of violations on the restrictions of large indoor gatherings. We work closely with the inspectional services and the Boston Police Department to enforce these restrictions when a complaint is made by email referrals to the 311 system. During these inspections, the Boston Police Department provide the enforcements, while our environmental inspectors at the Boston Public Health Commission take a primary role in providing education and awareness regarding pandemic restrictions and the spread of COVID-19. We're currently developing educational materials to be distributed at inspection visits made to a party house. These materials are being designed specifically for the ages 20 to 29 demographics and will include a COVID fact sheet, information about testing, and a QR code linking party attendees to testing locations. Boston Public Health Commission is also developing a letter to send to homeowners who host these gatherings in violation of COVID-19 restrictions. This letter will outline the restrictions on large gatherings and encourage any attendees to get tested. We also want to note that we continue to be proactive in our approach. We are monitoring websites like Meetup, Eventbrite, and social media for planned large gatherings so we can reach out to the organizers and prevent these gatherings from being held. As we find ourselves in the midst of the flu season and COVID-19 continues to spread, Boston Public Health Commission want to emphasize that mask wearing and social distancing are the key to prevent future transmission. If people do attend a party or gather with others, it's important that they seek out testing. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity to present. And I want to thank the Committee on City and Neighborhood Services for allowing me the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bethune, for your testimony and for your leadership on this important issue. At this time, I'd like to ask my colleague, Councilor Braden, if she would like to start off the Q&A. But before I do that, I'd like to recognize Councilor Mejia that's also with us, that has joined us. Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question about the number of, the teams that go out to do an intervention when there's a party ongoing. How many calls have you responded to so far? And what was the response of the folks when you approached these gatherings?
So we have a team we call the Investigations and Enforcement Team. We refer to it as the INE team because we love acronyms. And this team consists of inspectors from different disciplines, our constituent services liaisons, attorneys. It's led by our director of investigations, but most important that this team is a component of a larger team of an interagency partnership with the Health Commission, with the Fire Department, with the Police Department, and for this particular initiative also with the off-campus offices of local colleges and universities. So when this team operates in a variety of ways, there are times where we're doing follow-up on complaints that have already been responding to by the police department, or complaints that may come through 311 about things that happened in the past, where we're sending out warning letters, we're sending out information. We are also going out proactively when we have intelligence that places where there are recurring parties or parties are likely to happen. And when we do go out to do those type of investigations, I think we've done about 30 of those so far, then that team is consistent of ISD inspectors, police departments, and depending on where we're at, it may be a rep from the local college or a nearby college we think may have students who live in that area. What we've found so far is that in at least one case, we more than one case where weren't given access. So in cases like that, we're sending warning letters to the property owner. There are places that we've gotten access to and we've gotten the evidence, and we've issued, I believe, about 3 fines. So it's a mixture of things. There are some places that sort of operating illegal clubs that are having parties on a weekly basis. So we've teamed up with the police department, and I think we've had success in discontinuing those activities. So it's sort of a mix. Some of it is education, just to remind folks that these are the rules and you shouldn't be having parties at this time.
Thank you. In terms of, you say you've levied three occasions where you've had to issue fines?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I know, yeah, one was, I think, last weekend when we had a Halloween operation, and there was one, I think it may have been in your neighborhood, Councilor Braden.
Probably.
Yeah, there were about 63 people there, so.
Yeah, we were a little worried about Halloween. So did you see across the city, did you see an uptick in reports of parties on Halloween?
I'll leave it to Leon and Aisha to talk about the uptick in sort of complaints, but we did have a proactive strategy that weekend where we met with all the BPD CSOs beforehand, and also the colleges, to identify addresses that we were concerned about, and we sent our team out to over 30 plus addresses, and also looked at other addresses nearby throughout the city. So East Boston, Mission Hill, Austin, Brighton, South Boston.
The other issue of concern for me is sometimes these parties start early in the day, like they kick off about 3 o'clock. So a 9:30 curfew is not necessarily effective because they've been partying since mid-afternoon. Are there any reports of earlier in the day? What time of the day do you? Obviously the evening time would be more prevalent, but do you ever get called to parties during the early afternoon, evening on a weekend?
Yeah, we haven't gotten called to any day parties, but we certainly want to use this opportunity just to encourage the public to call 911 or call the party line that Aisha mentioned earlier, so that we are aware if this is occurring, that we want to know about it so we can address that as well.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for all of your work. I realize this is a totally cross-departmental effort, and I really appreciate the thought and consideration that's been put into this to try and keep us all safe. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Mr. Chair.
I just would like to add that, you know, if we do, we're trying to be as proactive as possible. If we do hear about parties, we try to at least, you know, make phone calls and send letters to those addresses to make sure that they stop. So we are doing that.
Yeah, there are a few locations that are frequent flyers out here,
Right.
so we almost know ahead of time where the hotspots are going to be. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Flaherty?
Chairman Flynn, yeah, just want to see what the possibility is of when those 911 call comes, when they come in for the loud house parties, and they go in as, I think, a priority 9. So obviously we don't have the benefit of having the police on with this morning, but was hoping that maybe the commission might have some inkling as to, I guess, what's the process by which those calls can be elevated to get a more prompt response. What we don't want to have happen is neighbors having to engage abutters in terms of telling them to lower the music down and/or, you know, that it's we're in a pandemic and they really shouldn't be having that many people over, particularly when there's booze involved and/or drugs. It's a recipe for disaster. So short of having our citizens engage their own neighbors and/or short of having someone go by with like a red or a green or a yellow vest on behalf of a particular city agency, I think that in many instances we're going to need the support of our police officers, and was hoping that these calls, given the importance of COVID-19 and it going from a public, generally a quality of life issue to a public health crisis, we might want to elevate those calls. That's just my ask is how do we elevate these beyond a priority 9, which is the lowest priority, and they get to them when everything else is clear. And we all know from the number of 911 calls that come in every year, close to 800,000, that sometimes these calls, linger for a while, and it forces neighbors to take matters into their own hands to quell the noise in the middle of the night.
That's a great question, Councilor. Sometimes there are competing priorities depending on what's going on, but I can tell you that this is a priority for the police department, and they've been very responsive. We are communicating with them regularly, meetings, emails, and what they're doing is when they respond, they'll tell folks to knock it off, and 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to listen to the police department. But when they don't, they're also reporting to us about chronic activities, certain problem properties, and those are the properties that we're doing some joint enforcement on. They're also going to be more vigilant in terms of making sure that they're getting us 1-1 reports with as much detail as they can provide, because that also will be helpful to us to be able to issue fines. Even though we may not be there to see it ourselves, we can use the police department's report as a witness, and also count on them to be present at any hearings if someone chose to appeal a fine. So it's a priority for the police department.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Next up is Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel. I know that we're talking primarily about house parties. Generally, these are being thrown by youth, but one of my concerns has been we're heading into, holiday family gathering season, and we are probably going to be seeing quieter parties, but parties nonetheless, where you have families gathering for Thanksgiving or families gathering for Christmas, either for Christmas events or for Christmas itself, and how we're planning ahead for that eventuality. Because right now, I know we're dealing with a lot of, teenage and young adults in colleges throwing parties and so on. We have some, I know in my district, we don't have so much of a college population, so our parties aren't necessarily in that realm, but we also, they're limited. There's a few spots that I know have had parties, and we've dealt with calling that in. But in terms of, the holidays, we're going to see a lot more activity from a lot of different demographics. And I just want to know what we're doing to get ahead of that as far as an information campaign, as far as preparing for that, so that we can sort of minimize that. Because I know for me, one of my major concerns is what happens when, Thanksgiving, everybody around the city's sitting down at different houses or at different homes, and what happens after that. So what are we doing to sort of at least educate on this?
Thank you, Counselor. That's another great question and great point, because I don't think that enforcement and fines is something that should be the primary tool when we're talking about family gatherings. I think education is important. Chief Martinez is already on top of this. We met yesterday. We're meeting weekly on this. I know that we're putting together strategies on how we could just increase our education and our prevention messaging around these type of gatherings going forward. Leon, I'm not sure if we have any details yet, but I know that this is something that is front of mind and is being actively worked on.
Thank you, because I agree with you. I don't see how we, I have a hard time saying how we would fine people for meeting with their families, but I certainly want to try and make sure that we create a situation where families at least know the risks and know to believe those risks. And so those are things that I would like to see us doing moving forward. I'm glad you're on it. That's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the work everybody's doing to address these issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. We're also joined by Councilor Asabi George. Councilor Kenzie Block, you're up next.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, Commissioner Irish and Aisha and Leon for all of the work that you're doing and for coming and taking time to talk to us about it. Leon, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, just if there's any update on where we are in terms of data and understanding spread, because I do think that one of our problems is that people don't think it's them and their family and friends who are spreading COVID. And I think it's why it's so important for us to all keep amplifying the message about people getting tested. And I'm glad to hear that we're sort of conveying testing messaging to people when we find them in these large gatherings. But I also just continue to think that if we had better data helping people see kind of the low level clustering, that would help get people to change their behavior. So I'm wondering where we are on that from a Public Health Commission perspective.
I mean, every day we're putting data on our website for folks to look at, and so as you know, the rates are going up in Boston, and I'll look at my situation report right here, and basically we're still the demographics of the 20 to 29, 30 to 39 are the biggest. We're in the community right now is where the spread is for COVID. As Commissioner Irish had said, when we go to these parties, we try to make sure that we record the address and we're looking at, to see if anybody get, so from us telling folks to get tested, they usually do. And we did find from last week, one of these parties, that a few people, did get COVID from the party. So I mean, we're continuing to monitor the spread around the city. And as for messaging, coming up into the holiday season, we're going to continue to put the messaging out there, through social media, through newspapers, whatever. And we also have boots on the ground right now in the various neighborhoods. Our folks are out there trying to educate folks wherever we find them, whether in the streets, business owners, whoever, to try to make sure they know, you know, how COVID is spread and how to protect themselves.
Great. Yeah, I think it would be wonderful. I know that there's been some discussion about these materials that are targeted at kind of that 20s and 30s demographic. I think it would be great for the council to have those to amplify more. I feel like I
Absolutely.
still don't really have those, and I represent a lot of those folks. I also do think that, I mean, you mentioned the party last week. I think to the extent the Health Commission could think about kind of like being able to share some anonymized examples about what spread has looked like. Because I think that, well, I recognize the data report is there and it shows an uptick. I think that there's still not obviously that immediate link for folks to behavior. And I do
Sure.
think that in fairness, the reality is that a lot of people in their 20s and 30s are also doing essential in-person jobs. And so I think it's reasonable for people to say, hey, well, is it really my party, or is it just that I'm being exposed to more people
Right.
out and about? And I think that we do have good reason to think that these indoor gatherings are a problem, and that they're going to become even more of one as life just moves indoors more into the winter. But I think that being able to sort of dramatize for people what that has looked like in specific cases could be really helpful with changing behavior. And so I would urge the Health Commission to think about ways to share that kind of cluster spread information examples in ways that obviously protect people's privacy.
Yeah, I think that's the major thing, is protect the HIPAA protection of people's privacy, and so I mean, we can't say, all right, at this address, you know, we found 40 people, you know, and you know, so you just gave everybody, you know, so we're trying to figure out how to do those messaging without compromising people's, you know, identity and so,
Right.
Oh yeah.
But we could be saying there was this house party of 40 people, and then over the course of this week, this many of those people tested positive, right? You could have a kind of
Yep.
have a visualization that doesn't involve giving up anyone's privacy. I just think that I just think we have to think about how to make this real for people, because it's just, you know, it's the problem of fighting an invisible enemy that we've been facing for a long time, and when you combine that with fatigue, I think it's just really important to make it visual for folks. But I do want to thank you for all these efforts. I also do want to acknowledge, you know, in Mission Hill, we have had a long tradition of challenges with house parties. And so this situation goes on top of that. And I will say that a number of our colleges and universities have been providing folks to be in immediate touch with BPD about calls that they get, to actually go to some of those calls on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. And I've found that a number of addresses that I've raised of the universities have been immediately checking their databases to figure out if they're their students. So I just do want to acknowledge that work and the work of Officer O'Rourke in Mission Hill, who really takes a community service kind of approach and goes and has conversations by day with people whose addresses came in at 311 by night, and kind of, you know, I think we do have to approach this as a public health crisis, and we have to approach it as a community, something that we're all asking each other to help with. But I do just want to emphasize something I said at the start, which is that I'm still hearing, I've got, you know, constituents who just don't call, you know, there's a plethora of numbers. There's 911, there's 311, there's the tip line for the universities, there's the party line for BPD. And then sometimes folks kind of know which college it's associated with and call that university's police department. And I would still say that it's possible for people to get kind of lost in that thicket and feel like they're getting given the runaround. And so the more that we can do collectively to make sure that all roads lead to Rome, and that people are getting a kind of effective, quick response, regardless of which path they take, I think is really important. And it is definitely one of the challenges that I'm still hearing. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Bach. Next up is Council President Janey. Council President.
Hello. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Just briefly, not so much the party situation, but given where we are in the calendar year, I wanted to, you know, understand I did have to, jump onto the phone, so I missed some of the conversation. I would agree with Councilor Arroyo that we don't want to find ourselves in a position of fining people for not doing the right thing. We want to incentivize people to do the right thing. But given the calendar year, families will be gathering for Thanksgiving. And I'm just wondering, what proactively can we do to get the messaging out there, to Councilor Bach's point around the safe things to do, how to, celebrate some of these holidays that are coming up in a much more safer fashion. I think the more we can give folks the information and the tools to gather safely or to limit, their gathering altogether, the better off we are, rather than trying to punitively come to them after the fact with fines. So I'm just curious if anyone on the panel can speak to any proactive thinking around messaging for the upcoming holidays. So not so much the college parties or the folks who are gathering for cookouts and other types of celebrations, but just thinking of the holidays that are coming up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President. Commissioner Irish, do you want to take a
Sure.
answer
Sure.
that one?
Yes, the messaging is critical, and it's as I mentioned before, it's something that's top of mind. It's something that we've already been in discussion about. I think there's been some parts of the messaging that's already been communicated in terms of helping people to think about how to celebrate safely this year. I think there's a lot more work to be done as we fine tune the strategy and launch a strategy, hopefully with everyone's help, to communicate safer ways for folks to participate. Testing should be an important part. If families are going to get together, some things that are going to be beyond our control, but I think at the very least people should avoid large gatherings and make sure everyone is getting tested, and even consider everyone wearing masks, even at these gatherings.
Right. Are we, for example,
Commissioner?
I don't mean to interrupt, but for example, are we asking people to quarantine 14 days before they would gather for such a holiday gathering? Are we including that kind of recommendation beyond the mask wearing? Are we asking people to self-quarantine if they plan to gather with family? I don't know that we've, have figured that out yet, but I just wonder if that was part of it.
Yeah. So I think we'll have more to say on that. The Chief Martinez is taking the lead on that, and working with the Health Commission with this being developed. But I will say that when we're going to need everyone to leverage all your networks to help us communicate this message out, and you'll be hearing from us in the very near future with an overall plan of how we can better communicate celebrating safely during COVID-19.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council President. Before we go to Councilor Mejia, Councilor Braden, who's one of the co-sponsors, has to leave at 12, but I wanted to get her in for one more question before she leaves. Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mejia, for letting me to cut the line. I had one question. An important part of the messaging is about testing, and then the consequence of the next step would be contact tracing. Have people been generally cooperative with contact tracing, or I hear reports of people not being cooperative and not sharing their contacts and generally impeding that process? What's your experience with that?
I think I can answer that. I think on our end, we've seen a little bit of both. I mean, folks, because of privacy, with the contact tracer, may not want to divulge us that sort of information. But as for the most part, people are cooperating with the contact tracers.
Thank you.
After that, we want to encourage everyone to get tested on a regular basis, at least every 2 weeks. We have testing resources all around the city, and I think folks need to just rethink that, not just to get a test because you think that you've been exposed or you're feeling ill. You could feel perfectly fine. It's still a good idea if you're out in public, if you're out and about, to get a test on a regular basis.
The other issue I'd like to put on this is more for Leon, is to really request that, after the holidays, I know this is an ongoing situation, but we're hearing from community folks concerns about students who don't leave for the holidays. Many of the universities are suggesting their students go home and don't come back until January, but I know there will be a large cohort of folks who are living off campus who won't go home. So is there a possibility that we could ramp up some testing in Alston, Brighton, the first week in December or something like that, so that we can try and capture those, that's maybe the wrong word, make sure that those folks get tested or offer them that opportunity close by. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. I want to say thank you to Councilor Mejia for allowing Councilor Braden to jump in. Next up, Councilor Mejia.
Yes. Thank you, Councilor Flynn, and the makers for this hearing. And always love to be in the presence of ISD, because you guys go hard for the community every day, all day. Dion, Commissioner Irish, you need to know that Aisha, you have the best of the best out in these streets. And when I always use this moment to just thank her publicly, because when we talk about people doing the work for the city of Boston, oftentimes those who are really doing the work behind the scenes usually don't get that recognition. And I just want you to know that there has not been one little Facebook post or text message that Aisha has not replied to, responded to, leaned into. People from across the entire city knows that your department, when it comes to the issues that are impacting all constituents, you have such an amazing team, and you all every day make the city of Boston shine. And Aisha, I know you and I always go back and forth on other things, but let me just tell you that you are just holding it down, and you guys are one of my favorite departments. And I'm always talking smack about this, that, or the other, and I don't give out a lot of compliments. So you know that I have lots of love for y'all. And so I really do appreciate everything that you all do. Commissioner Irish, I really do appreciate your team. Thank you so much for all that you do for the city. And so I just have a very few questions. I'm curious about, I understand that we're fining people for these parties, and I'm just curious as to whether or not we're fining the landlords, the tenants, who's getting the fine? Anyone who has the answer can answer that.
That's a good question. Commissioner, do you want to?
I'm going to let you should take that one. Thank you, Councilman.
Somebody
and, by the way, President Janey already gave her a promotion. She called her deputy commissioner, so she's going to be commissioner next, right?
Well, yeah. That's actually a good question. So what I've been trying to do after speaking with the commissioner and trying to have a good approach with finding people, because we just really didn't want to come off like we're just finding individuals. What we did, we called the landlords and gave them a preaching to, so to speak, and a verbal warning. This is happening at your residence, and you need to speak to your tenants. Now, after that conversation, I did let Chairman Flynn know some of the folks that I have gotten in contact with, just so he would know who was responding to my verbal phone calls. And it happened again. So at that point, we try to give you a warning letter, but if I verbally speak to you, you get a fine. Because I think that if I'm actually taking the time to call you, and so you'll know what the issue is and what's going on at your property, then you should probably take that into consideration, that this is happening, and you speak to your tenants and stop it. So what we're doing is we are fining those who go against the governor's order. The governor's order has changed, and it's now 10 inside, 25 outside. So our letter has changed based on the governor's order. And so far, we have sent out 41 warning letters and 4 fines of $500.
Wow. And so I'm curious, in terms of who these landlords are, do they live in Boston, or are these landlords that have property in Boston but really no stake in what happens in the city?
Without giving out too much information, I will say that some of these folks do live in South Boston and some do not.
Okay.
And as we speak to, it's not just happening in South Boston, but also in Brighton. There's quite a few in Roxbury, Mission Hill over the past weekend. During the Halloween weekend, we had 11 in Roxbury, Mission Hill, 7 in Austin, Brighton, and 8 in South Boston. Frequent, those who continuously have parties.
And not to throw,
we put them on the list for last weekend
uh-huh.
to see what they were going to do for this weekend, and they indeed were having parties. So just so you know, just for instance, one address had 63 folks in South Boston, 80 total, because some were going out the back doors and some were going out the front door. They received a fine, and we had one in Alston, Brighton, where there were 30 students, and they were, trying to escape so they wouldn't have any contact with the police or ISD for that matter.
So is it fair to say that most of these parties are being hosted and had by college students? And I'm not throwing them under the bus, but just to be real, these are not like,
I mean, and I have to say this, that the people of South Boston have been really patient. This has been going on for a while. We've been trying to take a subtle approach and just informing landlords of what they should not be doing and things they should be telling their tenants. And with the help of the Boston Public Health Commission, giving out information so they can stop the spread. But the noise continues. So if you're a lifelong resident, you're sitting in your house, you may be, you just want to relax because you really can't go anywhere. And it sounds like a band is sitting in your living room. It's an issue, and it's just becoming more of an issue. So we had to find ways in order to get our message across where that we mean business.
So let me ask you this question, and Leon, this might be for you potentially, or I don't think we have anyone here from the BPD, but I'm just curious, at what point do we start with this contract tracing at the very least, what schools these kids are from, and that potentially we can then hold those schools accountable to, because I think when we're thinking about accountability, it has to be 360. Some of it that falls on the responsibility of the landlord, some of it is the tenant, but then at some point we need to look at these schools that are the ones that are bringing a lot of the influx of these students into Boston. What opportunities exist when we do that contract tracing to then hold these schools accountable and potentially give them a fine because they're not doing their due diligence in controlling that environment? So I'm just curious as to, one, if that's something that we can potentially do, and if that's something worth looking into.
I think, for the contact tracing, this is just starting up where we're looking at, if we go out to the parties, we're running a list of the addresses and basically cross-referencing with the contact traces, just to see what the correlations are. As moving it further to see if that person went to a school. I'm not 100% sure if we've done that, but I know, just putting the address, on notice. And so when, somebody comes in that, that got sick at that address, we can at least, at least start tallying and as long as we get the information from that person that, they were at that party, we can start contact tracing. But the other part of looking at, correlating with the schools, I don't believe we've done that, but I can definitely check and check in with our Infectious Disease Bureau who does this work and get back to you.
Yeah, I just think it would be worth looking into in terms of another layer of accountability, because it can't always just fall on the city. It can't always, I just think that we always point a lot of fingers, but we're not doing a really good enough job in really looking at everybody who can be held accountable, including ourselves as residents too, right? So this is just an opportunity for everybody to really lean into it. And then the last thing that
Jen, 1 second.
I'm just curious about the data. Sure.
Yeah, I just want to add, not to speak for the schools, but I do want to share from our experience so far with our enforcement efforts. The schools have been very much engaged and proactive. They've been out there at night with us. They want us to inform them if any of their students are involved, and they're taking disciplinary action against students who are having large gatherings.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
I died. Wait 1 second. Whoa. My internet went away. So sorry.
Okay.
I just want to, okay, I'm back. I did hear the last piece about the schools being engaged. I heard that. But one last thing that I like to just offer is like very similar to what we did with the fireworks situation. Maybe and Chief about creating a PSA in multiple languages about the importance of the holidays and how we gather in ways that are safe. Even if it's just 3 little sound bites that we can get interpreted into different languages, I think that would be worth looking into in terms of just getting the word out. And I think working with Chief Jerome on putting together something, because they already have the infrastructure for that, might be helpful. It's just something to consider in terms of helping to raise awareness in multiple languages.
Councilor Mejia, you're gonna laugh at this. So I'm actually for inspectional services in charge of language access. So we're working on that piece now to make sure that that all languages are encompassed of the things that we send out and message.
Great, we're gonna be BFFs for sure now. All right, so that's it for, I'm sorry, Councilor Flynn, my internet was in and out, so I wasn't sure, but I yield the rest of whatever if I have any time left. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I'm not sure if Councilor Asabi George is with us. Councilor Asabi George. So I'll wait till Councilor Asabi George comes back, but I had a couple follow-up questions from my colleagues. If you could give me, I'll just take a minute. Can you, Commissioner or Mr. Bethune, so when there is a large party in a neighborhood, are we recommending that everybody at that party immediately or the next day go get testing? Is that the message we want to put out? I agree with that messaging, but is that what we're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Absolutely, because when you're drinking and you're in an enclosed space and there's somebody that's asymptomatic, you are more likely to spread COVID to all your other party goers. So we're emphasizing to everyone that if you're at a party and folks are not wearing masks, you're in an enclosed space, which is a triple decker or whatever, then you need to go get tested.
Okay. And my other question is, can you just talk about the communication that ISD has with Boston Police and with the public health when the Boston Police responds to a party, then describe the next steps in the process in terms of communication with ISD and with public health?
You want me to go? All right.
Yeah, you can start, Leon. I'll jump in.
So basically what we've been doing, the Commissioner Irish mentioned that we go out as a enforcement and inspection team. And so when we get the 311 call that comes in, we'll go out as a team and investigate those parties depending on the neighborhood. And as once we get there, we basically sign a consent before we walk through the door, and from there we disperse the parties. The Boston Public Health Commission team give out as much COVID information as possible to the party goers to make sure they're getting tested and they know about COVID, and we get the information of the tenants, the landlords, and from there we can issue our warning letters and fines. I don't know, Dion, you have anything? Commissioner Irish, have anything to add?
Not much more to add, other than the relationship is strengthened, strong with the police department in terms of communication around this effort, identifying properties that the police want us to follow up on. We're getting great reports from them. So the partnership is going well so far with enforcement. So anyone who's considering having parties on a regular basis or illegal clubs, and the party's over, this is not the time to be partying.
Thank you, Commissioner and Mr. Bethune. I guess my final question is, like us all, we have great respect and admiration for our dedicated city employees, our police, our ISD team, our public health team. When they respond to a house party, our city employees, and there was a recent party, you mentioned there was 80 people or 50 people, what type of public health, are we putting our dedicated city employees also in jeopardy by responding to these parties, being exposed to COVID-19? And obviously there's probably some sense that we are, but what type of assistance are we providing city employees that may be exposed, or are we asking city employees to get tested immediately as well?
And so for our employees, as you know, they're all provided with protective equipment and trained to make sure that we're diligent in maintaining physical distancing, not having close encounters with folks, even while we're doing inspections. So, if we can accomplish it by being 10, 12 feet away, by seeing what we need to see and addressing it, that's what we're doing. With respect to testing, we are not only encouraging all of our employees to get tested on a regular basis, Mayor Walsh has also offered a benefit where every employee gets an hour every 2 weeks, every 14 days to get a test. So that's strongly encouraged, irrespective to we're responding to a party or we're inspecting a construction site or a residential dwelling.
Thank you.
I echo the same as Commissioner Irish. Same thing on the Boston Public Health Commission. All our inspectors are, trained to maintain physical distance. They're all have PPE that they carry around, hand sanitizer. One of the things we do when we go to these parties is we do give out hand sanitizers, along with all the COVID information. And so our folks are well aware of all the testing sites around Boston. We encourage them to get tested, and they're well protected with personal protective equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Bethune, and thank you, Commissioner, for your response. And the reason I asked that question is just out of the respect that we all have for city employees that are really keeping the city moving forward, especially during this difficult time in our city and country. I want to say thank you to the panelists for your outstanding work on this issue and many issues across the city. Commissioner Irish and Mr. Bethune and Assistant Commissioner Miller as well, and the ISD team, the Boston Police team as well. They're providing exceptional service to our residents, often criticized, but there they go to work every single day. They get up in the morning, they do their job, and they're trying their best to keep our city safe and our residents healthy, as others are as well. Having said that, Councilor Flaherty, are you interested in giving final comments before we
No, it's well
begin this?
said, Mr. Chairman. Just following your lead on that, and look forward to continue to work with our Boston Police Department, Inspectional Services, and Public Health Commission to get these house parties under control, and let's get COVID under control and move our city forward.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Thank you to the panelists for being here. Thank you to my colleagues on the Boston City Council. Kerry, I'm not sure if we have any public testimony. I forgot to ask that. Do we have any public testimony, Kerry?
I didn't get any, but if the folks in the waiting room would like to raise their blue hand, yep, I see you. We'll let you in and you can offer testimony. So we have Lori Rodwin.
Okay, I apologize. I should have asked that before. Lori, you're up next. Do you want to offer public testimony?
Yes, I do, sir.
Okay, you have the floor for about a minute. Is that okay?
I'm sorry?
Yes, you have the floor for about a minute. Is that okay?
I'll do the best I can. Thank you for the makers of this hearing. I am Lori Radwin. I live in Rosendale and I have a PhD and I'm a nurse. So this hearing is going to be full of evidence. Simply put, as in healthcare, processes are important, but outcomes are the true test. And our colleges and universities have not done well when controlling COVID outbreaks, and they are continuing to contribute to the spike in cases in Boston. So in terms of parties and gatherings, we've seen it in the press. We know from the beginning of the semester to this day that parties and gatherings are being held by college students. BU should be commended for actually posting the number of parties on their COVID dashboard. But the results are very disconcerting. So from late August through late October, they had 21 on-campus events. But the really scary part is they had over 5 times that number off campus. There were 121 events off campus during that time. And a BU blog also described that a single one-night off-campus party led to a cluster of 14 cases. College athletic events violate Governor Baker's limits because they exceed 25 persons. University academics and athletics leadership acknowledged that they risk the spread of COVID, and they also acknowledged that they would have really consequential financial outcomes if they don't hold these events. But athletic events result in an increase in campus COVID cases. It can be as low as 25% to as high as 822%. That's not a typo. Under the worst case scenario, this is the rate of increase that scientists calculated for the worst possible scenario. So let me give you a quick example of a not good scenario. Boston College and Clemson played football on October 31st. In the prior week, Clemson had 4,082 total semester COVID cases, over half of the campus COVID cases in the state. On the same day, BC had a semester total of 233 cases, which was the highest number of COVID cases on campus in the entire state of Massachusetts. So according to the scientifically based projections, we're going to have to expect a spike in BC COVID cases because of this athletic event. I'll say, as I said in October briefly, that campus COVID cases are related to COVID cases in the county. Researchers tell us that in the fall, when colleges opened, they had an increased 3,000 additional US COVID cases per day, and students coming from outside areas with high COVID rates particularly added to the column. So in summary, despite the processes that BC, BU, and Northeastern put into place, the science tells us that the outcomes were very bad. And based on science, we should anticipate more spikes in college and county COVID cases if processes aren't changed. Based upon the science, common sense holds that all upcoming college athletic events should be canceled and students should not return to campuses in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. If there's anyone else that has a question from the public, please raise your blue hand. I don't see any hands raised at this time. I'll give it another few seconds. Well, again, thank you to the panelists for your outstanding leadership, for your testimony. Again, to my colleagues, Mayor Walsh's team. And I want to say thank you to Kerry and Juan at Central staff for helping us organize today's testimony, today's hearing. Thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Make sure you gavel us out, Flynn. You have to do the gavel.